All right, guys. I've said in the comments when people asked for my takes on season 5, am I going to make a video about season 5? Am I going to talk about it? I've always consistently said, I don't know. Don't expect it. It might not happen. So just check out the Discord, check out the Twitter, and my thoughts will be on there for sure. But after finishing season 5, literally this morning, um, I finished the full series, and I am done with one of the most important, I think, works of fiction I've ever seen. And so I said, I gotta cap it off. I gotta cap it off. A trilogy of The Wire talks and rambles, but this time, no lights are on. Um, I'm not even gonna edit this video. I don't think. I'm just gonna record it completely raw. So bear with me for that. But hopefully it's not a big deal. The audio will be my stream audio. It won't be edited. Anyway, it is what it is. Um, I finished it, like I said, a couple of hours ago. And if we're speaking specifically about season 5, in and of itself, I don't really understand, or I think I understand, but I can't relate at all to the idea that this is somehow this huge drop off for this show, for this overarching story, and this this behemoth of a structure of a story. I think this is an essential piece to everything in terms of the structure, the thematics, the full picture, each season being its own story and building upon itself, and obviously plot events happen within it that are necessary. So I don't think that anyone's disputing that. But even aside from the how necessary it is, how important it is for the whole series, one could say that it's this important, but it just isn't up to the same quality. I just totally disagree. This is the shortest season. It's got 10 episodes in comparison to the 12 or 13 for all the seasons prior, I believe. And I just felt honestly, one of the biggest flaws with it is I just found myself wishing there was more because I was enjoying it so much. Not even because stuff wasn't fleshed out, just because I was enjoying it so much. Obviously, we have season 1, the introduction of the drug trade, the Barksdale organization, the police, the pro-tags, the antags, both sides, two sides of the same coin, D'Angelo kind of being a bridge in the middle, Omar being a wild card. Season 2 expands that and is the first example of showing you how the story is bigger than just the drug trade. It's about the systematic issues that plague the world at large, but specifically Baltimore, and how societal decay, economic decay from those, the powers that be, selfish interest, hypocrisy, all of that sort of thing by those who should be the least susceptible to those vices, cause such economic collapse that it results in those who are affected to resort to means that are not loyal to who they are, but that they have to for the sake of their survival and the survival of those they love. The dock workers, Frank Sabatka, etc. Season 3 then takes a lens into the politics, the higher level politics at play, and the perspective of those in power and how this comes to be, through the likes of, an increased focus on Davis and Burrell, but specifically through Carcetti. And then season 4 goes opposite, ground level, to show the effects of that rot and how it actually doesn't even start at the top. The top is sort of a byproduct of generational cycles that lead to it, but it actually starts at the bottom. And if this needs to be tackled, it needs to be in the schools, on the streets, with the children. And then season 5 takes this really beautiful magnifying lens into the perspective of the media, the Baltimore Sun, the newspapers, and how, just like the Barksdale organization, the Stanfield organization, the police, the media is a system with those trying to do the right thing, those just trying to get ahead, those being selfish, those using it responsibly, and those using it incredibly irresponsibly, which only further cements this decay and reinforces the situation that has caused all of the tragedy we see in the story. So, in terms of the structure, it is so pristine to me. It is so pristine. It's an angle that's necessary that ties it up beautifully. And from a meta lens, you know, how beautiful to end this story with a season that is focused on narratives, right? To look at the whole journey from the perspective of the narrative. There's lots of really beautiful little lines in this that are very metatextual and sort of this season is much more of a satirical black comedy to me, more extreme, and I think that's where a lot of the criticism probably comes from, that it's less realistic. I don't know. That's neither here or there for me. What's more important is how dialectically believable it is. And 4 seasons of driving in how incompetent, selfish, dysfunctional the police system is, the hierarchy is, how broken it is, how priorities are so skewed. I did not, despite it being sensational, and sensationalized by McNulty, I did not for a second think there's no way this would ever happen in this world. Not for a second. You know, call me naive. I don't think I'm being naive. I think it genuinely is established very beautifully that this is something that could happen in the way it did. And it's not just cartoonish and over the top. To me, it maintains a grounded realism, or grounded believability, rather, within the setting and the way it comes about. That doesn't say there aren't moments that are a little, where I'm like, ooh, okay, well, once in a while there were. But by and large, the macro, those are not even criticisms to me. They don't take away from my enjoyment at all. And the macro, it is saying something so essential, that just look what has to be done for proper police work to be done. Look what has to be done so that Carcetti has to actually fund something that's so important. The Marlowe Stanfield organization taking in kids, manipulating them, causing them to commit murder, taking them into the drug trade, causing them to be cast out, Randy, Michael, like each member of each child from season 4, the tragedy that results in all of them, for all of them, is obviously a systemic issue, but directly comes from Marlowe, or directly or indirectly. And so if we're trying to tackle this at the roots, obviously, you know, revamp the school systems, all that sort of thing that you know, Colvin's a part of, but Marlowe is a huge part of that to stop this exploitation. Cut that off, you know, go at the ground level. That's the way forward. I know it's easy to talk about because these issues can be easy to talk about and say it gets resolved this way, and then once you get into it, the red tape, the issues, it just piles up. But, you know, that's from a base level. Those are the problems. Those are huge problems that need to be addressed. Marlowe's a big one. And how backwards is it that because Carcetti was so prideful and full of ego that he could not accept funding for the schools from someone who would then use his reputation, from the governor who would then say this is a favor, it would make Carcetti look weak, so he didn't accept that. So because of that, he's needing to bend over backwards to fund the schools, but because of that, he can't actually approach addressing the issue that is causing a lot of the problems in the schools. It's all interlinked. It's genius, man. It's genius. And this season really puts it all into perspective, how connected everything is. It's this interconnected mosaic of corruption and systematic issues that go back ages and ages and ages, and it's cyclical. And I think it's genius that the last 10 minutes of this season directly reflect the beginning of season 1. You know, we have Sidnor doing what McNulty did in season 1 with the judge, right? We have all these characters in different roles. We have Carver in Daniel's role, Daniel becoming a lawyer, and then Perlman becoming a judge. And not that part isn't, you know, it's cyclical in some ways, but not cyclical in the way I mean. But, you know, McNulty, ex-police, Omar is gone, but he's replaced by Michael. The cycle continues. There's more than that. There's so many different things. The Greek talking with um, uh, Slim Charles, in the way that the Greek would talk to the Stanfield organization prior, you know? It just keeps going on and on and on. And it will keep going on and on and on. And I like that there's hope as well, because Bubbles is the most hopeful story to me. Namond is one of the most hopeful stories. There are glimmers of hope for sure, and I like that. And that's something that's what stops you from completely despairing and giving up. But overwhelmingly, it is a cyclical thing that does not let up, that does not stop. Um, and it won't change until fundamental tenets of humanity that fall victim to a culture that encourages cynicism is stopped. And how does that stop? We see so many characters try to prevent that through coloring outside the lines. McNulty, Lester, Bunny, and you know, doing this in the case of Lester and McNulty causes them to do things that are incredibly immoral as well. But as a necessity to do this, that's like, it just shows how backwards everything is. And likewise with Templeton, just on the other side, making all these stories up as well. It's just so irresponsible. And it makes you think, like, is there. Obviously, one always wants to look out for themselves, but at the cost of what? I don't know. It's just so devastating in its understated simplicity. I don't know. It's brilliant to me. It's brilliant. And the satirical lens, in some moments, you just can't help but laugh. It beautifully brings the story together in all the ways I just mentioned, but in some ways, you just can't help but laugh. There are some moments where after McNulty makes up this serial killer, he sees that Templeton is doing the same thing, and his reaction's unbelievable acting. Yeah. Anyways, those are my overall macro thoughts on The Wire so far. I think it's one of the most important stories I've ever experienced, and I've talked a lot lately on stream about stories that, a lot of my stories, I don't often actually think about how much I agree with their messages or their politics. I don't actually think about that often. A lot of my favorites, it doesn't even come to me about whether I agree with them or not. I just think they're beautiful stories in terms of their intent and what they try to get across and the character writing and the setting, etc. So, like, it's only after really examining, Haikyuu, how do I feel about it? Do I agree with it? No, actually, yes, I do. I agree with so much of it. But it isn't one of the first things I think of. But if I really do think about it, The Wire has to be one of the stories that politically, ideologically, I agree with the most out of anything I've ever seen. The only thing in close competition with it, out of stuff I've experienced recently, I think, is probably out of works that are overtly very political. Andor. Andor and The Wire are right up there. So, just really interesting side note, I guess. But in terms of the season, yeah, I loved it. I think it's probably my third favorite. It's kind of neck and neck with season 1. My favorite is season 4. My second favorite is season 3. The Barksdale stuff, it's just too brilliant for me. Then season 5 and 1 is kind of in a tie. And then season 2 after that. That's how I feel. But even my least favorite, season 2, is still a strong 8 out of 10 or so. And then season 1's a 9. Season 5, a 9. Season 3 is a strong 9. Season 4 is a 10. The series overall, I think, has got to be a 10. But anyway, sorry, I'm all over the place. Some stars of this season. I really loved the sort of understated approach to the end of Kima's arc, Greg's arc, and how she kind of reflects elements of early McNulty as well, again, in that cyclical way. I was so taken aback by how much I loved Bunk as well. Bunk was incredible. Lester, incredible. McNulty, you guys know how I felt about McNulty going forward. And early in the season, I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know if I want him to be collapsing back into this stuff again. I think or rather, if he is collapsing back into the womanizing, the alcohol, the general debauchery and irresponsibility, I was just like, man, I wrote this in my Discord server. This is literally a 50-50 between if McNulty becomes a waste of time for me or if he becomes one of the best characters in the story. Luckily, he became one of the best characters in the story. And I think he's a beautiful reflection. I think it all comes to fruition towards the end where you just see him looking at the Baltimore skyline. McNulty is the best personification of Baltimore in a character. Just like Baltimore, he is cyclical. Just like society, he is cyclical, and he falls into the same patterns. And you look at certain elements of progress and you have hope, and then he goes back again. And then when you see it making progress, it's done in a way that is unsavory. And so you go, should progress be made in this way? I don't know. And then he goes back again. And then by the end of it all, he's not police anymore. He's gone. And it makes you think, is he going to change? Is he going to be able to change this city? And I love that we're left with that question mark. I don't think McNulty will ever go back on his morals. Season 4 was him at his happiest, but it was also him at his least influential. And so I think if he were to reflect on that, would he be able to really stomach being personally happy if he's not making the change in the world that he wants to make? Even if that leads to him being a worse person. I don't know. Baltimore's a city that constantly tries to break itself out of this systematic rot. And it falls back on itself over and over and over. Just like McNulty. And I don't know if it ever will change. I don't know if McNulty ever will change. I think it's interesting because Baltimore as a city, I think, is given glimmers of hope, but 90% of it, to me, is devastating. McNulty as a character, I think we're left with a 50-50. Will he go back? Will he fall into old habits? Or will he continue to strive for change and maybe make that change? I think McNulty is honestly, in a strange way, one of the biggest glimmers of hope for that. But more than anything, I just love that it was narratively fulfilling. I love that we saw something different, that we saw progress with stagnation. McNulty was brilliant. He was maybe the star of season 5 for me. It was incredible. Omar, I don't have much to say about Omar. I think his death was one of the most shocking moments in the show. And I think it's very appropriate that the children that he would constantly be disarmed by, or not, the one time where someone could get a one-up on him was around children, because he was never trying, like, that was never his aim, is to exploit children. He was the true wild card, hitting back at the ills of society that wrong those he care about, him, that he thinks need to be wronged. And that was never children. So how appropriate that it is Kennard, who shoots him. Sadly, the kid who looked up to him as an idol, once again exploited by a monster, by an evil entity in Marlowe. And speaking of Marlowe, Bunk, I don't know if I mentioned Bunk as well, was absolutely brilliant. Love Daniels here and his dilemma with Perlman as well. I think Rawls was actually really, really interesting as well. I thought Herc and Carver, both in their diverging paths, incredible. Even Levy, the lawyer, was great. But Marlowe, it all comes together for Marlowe for me. Loved seeing him with Avon as well, by the way. It all comes together. He is juvenile. He is simple. He is someone who was raised understanding the value of your name on the streets and the value of the crown. And so, when he's given everything in the end, when he loses the crown but is given the notoriety, the legitimacy that Stringer was looking for, It's like nothing to him. It's immaterial. He doesn't care about that. He's a monster who knows nothing but the street and reputation and his name. And so that's why when he's stolen from, when his name is spoken on the street as being scared of Omar, that is the most important thing. What you stand for, what your name stands for, what your reputation is, at the expense of everything. To claw yourself on top in this system and impose the oppression that's been imposed on you onto others, and for everyone to know that you made it, that you're fearsome. There's a bit of Avon in there, and through the cold calculation, a bit of Stringer too. But he is his own entity. He is colder than the rest. I would say he is an inherited evil. Whereas I honestly, I know Stringer does evil things. I know Avon does evil things. I wouldn't call either of them evil, but I would call Marlowe evil. I would call his organization evil. What it does, it is monstrous, it is emotionless, it is cold, calculating, and evil because I think it reflects exactly what Marlowe learned the world was. You want it to be one way, but it's the other way. Marlowe wanted the world to be one way, but it's the other way. That's what he learned. That's what he imposes on everyone else. And so he learned if you can't beat him, join him. Become that monster. That's what he became. And it's an interesting mix with becoming that to not be not be forgotten in life, not lose yourself and make a mark and live something worth living. It's a mix of needing to do that, needing to be that cold monster, and also needing to be recognized, because that need to be recognized shows where he's come from. He's come from a place where he was cast out, pushed down, oppressed. So that is Marlowe to me. Both an emotionless monster, because that's what he needs to be to gain this notoriety, but at the same time incredibly, the core of it being incredibly heartfelt, being very juvenile, childlike, in some ways brittle. And I think the perfect final villain, the overall villain of The Wire, it all clicks for Marlowe for me. But anyways, that's my thoughts on season 5. I already gave my thoughts on The Wire as a whole. It is one of the best TV shows I've experienced, one of my favorite experiences in terms of stories this year, and maybe over the past few years. I make a top 100 ranking every year of my favorite fictional stories. The Wire is going to be on it. It's definitely into my top 5, 6, 7 favorite TV shows of all time, and that's lowballing it. I feel like The Wire is something that only gets better on rewatch, even to a greater degree than a lot of my favorites. A lot of my favorites, I experience them, I'm like, this is better on rewatch, I'm sure, or replay, or reread. The Wire, that is to an even greater extent. I feel like it almost feels intentional to rewatch, for this to be watched twice, because of the way you're dropped into season 1 and everything's unfamiliar and it's very hard to get into because you're like, who are all these people? What is this slang? What is this dialect? What are these systems and hierarchies? Like, it's overwhelming. But at the end of it all, it's like home. You understand it. You know these characters. So I feel like rewatching season 1 immediately will be like a whole new story. And I maybe intend to do that. I might do that. I don't know. But it is without doubt one of my favorite TV shows of all time, and it's in that top 100 for sure. How high up? If you're interested, come out to the streams early next year, or in spring of next year, or whatever. But what's most important is it's up there. Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, The Sopranos, Succession, Black Sails. Mad Men's my favorite show of all time. I don't know if that'll ever change. But The Wire is undoubtedly, in terms of pure quality, it's hard to beat. It is, to me, nearly faultless. The only problems I have are maybe some like little tiny things in season 5, which honestly, like I said, don't affect me at all. And season 2, and season 5, another problem with season 5 actually is that, or not a problem, but I guess a limitation, a lack of a positive rather than a negative, is the newspaper crew, the media crew. They could have been a bit more interesting. I found Templeton really interesting. I found Guts really interesting. I liked it. it could have been like amazing, and it just wasn't amazing. But whatever, I don't care about that. But also season two, I do maybe it'll change on rewatch, but I doubt it. I feel pretty confident with it being a bit too overwhelming, jumping into something so starkly different twice in a row, um, and with a far less interesting cast. I don't know. Season two is probably like it's my least favorite, like I said, but it's still very good. Anyways, it's up there with my favorite TV shows ever. And just really quick, I'm doing this live. Let me screw around with my filters and stuff. I wanted to do to show you guys. I usually do my character ranking, right? Well, I did a tier list. I did a little tier list. I'll just quickly go through it. Here we are. Let me just fix my sorry, like I said, we're not even editing this. There we go. Perfect. This is my character tier list for The Wire. There are no bad characters in The Wire. C tier is all the characters are just like fine. I don't really care about them, but they do their job. They are what they need to do. I don't feel strongly about them at all. To me, there's one bad character, and it's this guy. I've actually read up on the influence behind him. He's actually one of the characters most based off of real life people. Like, I get that, I know that. That isn't lost on me. But to me personally, it's hard to take him seriously because of how dramatic, over the top, and at times kind of cartoonish he is. Like the things people say about season 5 at times. I feel about Father Mouzone or Brother Mouzone. Just too much for me. Just too over the top. I don't like him. I found it hard to take the scenes he was in seriously, which is too bad because some of them, could have maybe hit a bit harder if he wasn't being who he is in them. But yeah, he's my least favorite character in The Wire. Luckily, his most important scenes, like a standoff with Omar or when he kills Stringer with Omar, they weren't affected by him. But yeah, I do think he's the one character in The Wire that I would probably argue is bad. He just doesn't fit with the show for me. I understand. I'm not saying he isn't realistic technically. I just don't think he's a fit for the tone of the series. Even if you disagree, hopefully you get that. These are all C tier characters. They're fine. Not much to say about them. Same with B tier characters. I think they're good, notable. I loved Poot's fate. I love the Foot Locker thing in this tier list. I love that he got out of it. Ziggy's a good character. Didn't hit super hard. This guy is one of the most hateable characters, but I think he's very essential for being that type of one of the true faces of the police force. Like, he needs to be genuine. Yeah, I don't have much to say about these. These are all good characters that I generally enjoy, that are decent. Here we start getting into heavy hitters. Naaman's mom is so hateable. So beautifully, brilliantly hateable, but she does her job really, really well. Like I said, I'm a big fan of Gus. I think he's really great. Kennard represents something incredibly tragic. Burrell's great. Perlman's great. Loved Levy's role. Jay Landsman, incredible final scene where he actually talks about how much he genuinely thinks Jimmy is the best of them. Just an overall really, really solid character. Slim Charles is great. Weebay would be in B if not for him saying, like, him letting Naaman out at the end of season 4, like, saying to, I forget her name. I forget his wife's name, but, her talking about how Naaman needs to be a man. He needs to be in the game. And Weebay just goes, look where it got me. Understanding, and in a way transcending the culture that's been imposed upon him for the sake of his son. Look where it got me. Do I want my son there? So that was so meaningful to me. Prospector Joe is just a really cool, fun, great, functioning piece in this world. One of my favorite things about, this is a tangent, but CD Projekt Red characters is that not every character needs to be flashy or over the top or have incredibly emotional moments or dramatic moments. Sometimes you want these characters to just be a living, breathing, functional part of this world with influence that tell you about the setting, that tell you about their dynamics, that inform you in a believable, real, raw, entertaining way. Like I say this about Dexter Deshawn in Cyberpunk 2077. Uh, like any given random political figure in The Witcher 3 or Cyberpunk. Um, the Wire's character writing actually is very reminiscent. I know The Wire came before CD Projekt Red games, but I wonder if The Wire in some way was kind of an influence for this type of character writing, where some of these characters don't need to be flashy. Not everyone has to make you cry. You know, they can just be very functional, believable pieces of the political systems within the world. Because I see that, like, that's something I love about CD Projekt Red games, and I saw that a lot in The Wire. So I don't know. I don't know if anyone's ever thought the same, but Prospector Joe is a great example of that, of the sort of character that makes that makes these stories tick. I actually really like Rawls. Honestly, in reflection, put Rawls up to S because, yeah. One second, let me just switch the scenes and get out of. Oh God, sorry. We're doing this live. I actually really like Rawls a lot. And what I love about him is you see him in a gay bar in season 2 or 3, maybe 3. I don't know exactly, and it's never addressed again. There's no plot line about him being gay. You just see him there, and it's like, okay, I guess they just wanted me to know that he's gay. I don't know. But it kind of dawned on me in season 5 through seeing kind of his concluding dynamics with McNulty that the reason he is the way with McNulty, he's so fiery with McNulty, is because McNulty's able to be what he's not. McNulty, for better or worse, is free, unrefined, expressive. Sometimes it's very flawed, but more than anything, McNulty can live free and be who he is in the way that Rawls probably thinks he can't because of his closeted sexuality. And if you look at it in that lens, it makes a lot of his actions make a ton of sense, even if it's not conscious on his part. Maybe he doesn't even think about this, but I think it's at least unconscious. This guy is so free, unrefined, unrestrained, expressive. He does whatever the fuck he wants, and I can't. That's profound to me. I don't have much to say about Norman, but this guy, I love him. I love him. Always at Carcetti's side, being disappointed by him, supporting him at times, being disappointed by him. I just think Norman's great. Davis is this disgusting snake that I love to hate. And I talked about Chris in season 4. I think he's a brilliant character, brilliantly subtextual, very efficient. Kima's awesome. I talked about Herc before as well. I think he's great. And again, a divergence in contrast to Carver. Frank Sabatka, again, a really good. I think one of the shining lights of season 2. Then we get to Double S. These are special characters to me. Daniels, I think he's the star of season 1, but I think he ends very strong and still ends up being one of the better characters in the series. I'm really a big fan of him, and I love how he ended. Wallace, one of the reasons why season 1 ticks. Love Lester, love Cuddy. Bunk, like I said, surprised me so much with how much I loved him. I was so overjoyed with Bunk. Namond, I actually teared up when I saw him with his parents giving this talk about diseases and stuff in Africa. He's one of the hopes of the future. Randy, unfortunately, a much darker fate. Tragic. Dookie, one of the most tragic fates. Maybe the most tragic thing was Dookie shooting up at the end of the series. Disappointing Prez. That is, to me, storytelling does not get much darker than that. And maybe for another story, I could say I wanted Dookie's story to end with hope, but not The Wire, not with what it's trying to say. The Wire needs to be as scathing and critical with its storytelling as it can be without going into grimdark, edgy for the sake of it territory. And it just about does that perfectly. And I think characters like Dookie are necessary to say that as much as you hope for them to get out of this bright, young, beautiful soul who had this beautiful connection with Prez. So many ways things could have been different, and he just ends up shooting up. When he could have been another Naaman. Bodhi, one of the best characters. Bubbles is, I think, the hope of the series. I didn't connect with him as much as I thought I might. Like, he's not top 10 or so. More top... Where is he now? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. He's 12. Top 12. Still one of the best characters. Incredible character. But there are others that are a bit more interesting to me or that I connect a bit more with. But Bubbles is by far one of the most important characters. Still, D'Angelo's still one of my favorite characters. And in the top 10, I was actually shocked by how much I loved Michael. Michael is someone who is the next Omar, right? He's the next generation. And it really sort of dawned on me when he drove his brother Bug out to be with his aunt, when he dropped off Dookie, that I talked about this in my Discord server. But let's see if I can get exactly what I said. But he was trapped. He had gotten to a place in which he was trapped. He couldn't make it into Marlowe's crew because he just, I think, for a number of reasons, but he also just wasn't built for it. Let me just see what I said. Yeah, I said he was just too deep in the game, just unlucky enough to be trapped within it. Also, unlucky enough to have his horrific, it wasn't his father, but Bug's father. Trapped within it, confined within it, he can't get out, but he does enough to try to ensure that Bug gets out. That Dookie is set up as best as possible. And I thought he might have died. But the fact that Michael is able to end up being another Marlowe after all that he's gone through, I think is one of the more positive elements of the series to me. Let me know if you think differently. But if you look at the main 4 kids of season 4, 2 end in complete tragedy. 1 ends in a bunch of hope. The other is living his own life, an outlier to the system. I think that's about appropriate, and I think that's as much hope as I think was necessary. Michael is an incredible character to me, and one of my favorite, maybe if I'm thinking of television in general, probably my second favorite child character in television, I think. Yeah, I think so. The number one being Sally Draper from Mad Men. Carcetti, God, I had so much hope for Carcetti, but he just falls into it. Hypocrisies, he lost himself in it. And he became yet another disappointment. I had so much hope for him, but what a great example of a character that falls into the system despite seeming to be a glimmer of light. Just, it builds and it builds and it builds, and the crown of leadership, the need for self-preservation, it just causes you to lose yourself. Marlowe I talked about, I think he's my 8th favorite. He's my 8th favorite. I truly was delighted with how he came about. He's one of my favorite TV villains, I gotta say. Love Carver, talked about him a lot before. He's my 7th favorite. Avon is number 6. In the end of it all, Prez is top 5 for me. And then we have, I've talked a lot about Prez already. I think he's one of the shining lights of the show. McNulty is my 4th favorite. He's really brilliant. He might go into this tier upon reflection, but he's my 4th favorite, and I'm delighted to say that. Then we have Colvin, my 3rd favorite. Omar, my 2nd. And, sorry, I've got to zoom in. And Stringer Bell, the eternal top 1. That's what I got, guys. If you want to see where these characters end up in my top antagonists list, for some of the antagonists, the protagonists for maybe McNulty, the top 100 fiction in general for The Wire. You can check out those streams. You can follow me on Twitch. But more than anything, thank you so much for listening to me, for joining me on this journey, for being a part of it. I really do appreciate it. And I guess it was an unexpected surprise to be able to share this with you guys. I didn't think anyone would really care. But yeah, it's been a great journey, and I hope this video was kind of what you were looking for, despite, some of the no editing, unpolished, unrefined, no music. Hopefully that's okay. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good one. The Wire, man. It took me long to get into it, but I'm so glad I did, and at this stage of my life.